There are places in the Australian bush where the road signs have been torn down on purpose, places the government has erased from official maps, places where locals will give you directions to anywhere else. But go quiet when you mention the name. Australia holds more than 50,000 abandoned sites scattered across its interior, but most of them are just empty buildings and rusted machinery. The 12 places you are about to see are different. One of them is so dangerous that breathing its air can kill you decades later. Another spent 50 years underwater before the drought pulled it back to the surface. And one was abandoned so fast that dinner plates are still sitting on the tables. Locals refuse to visit these places, and by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why. Because some towns do not die quietly. Some towns wait. Before we head into the bush, take 1 second to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We uncover the forgotten corners of Australia every single week, and the stories coming up will change how you see the outback forever. Now grab your torch. We are going in. Number 1. Wittenoom, Western Australia. Deep in the Hamersley Range sits the most dangerous town in the Southern Hemisphere, and you will not find it on any current map. The government removed Wittenoom from official records, cut the power grid, and tore down the road signs, but the town itself is still standing. In the 1950s, this was a booming settlement of 20,000 people built around one industry, mining blue asbestos. The miners worked in clouds of it. Children played in it. The local council even spread asbestos tailings across the school playground and the racetrack to keep the dust down. Nobody knew they were paving their town with poison. Then the deaths began. More than 2,000 former residents have died from asbestos-related diseases, and the fibers are still in the soil, still in the air, still lethal. A single breath of disturbed dust can plant a disease that takes 40 years to surface. Doctors call it the long fuse. Mesothelioma has no cure, and Wittenoom's blue asbestos is considered the deadliest form ever mined anywhere on Earth. Despite this, influencers keep sneaking past the warning signs to take photographs in the ruins, and health officials describe every single visit as a game of Russian roulette played in slow motion. The last resident was forced out in 2022, but the eeriest part is what remains. Houses with furniture inside, a cinema with its screen intact. Locals in the Pilbara will drive 2 hours around it rather than pass through, because Wittenoom does not attack you like a snake or a fire. It kills you slowly, decades after you have left. Number 2. Old Adaminaby, New South Wales. In 1957, the government drowned an entire town on purpose. Adaminaby stood in the path of the Snowy Mountains scheme, so its people were relocated, its buildings were moved or demolished, and the rising waters of Lake Yucumbene swallowed everything left behind. For 50 years, the old town slept beneath the surface. Then came the Millennium Drought. The lake dropped to 10% of its capacity, and old Adaminaby rose from the water like something out of a nightmare. Foundations emerged first, then entire streets, fence posts, the town bridge, rusted car bodies from the 1940s sitting exactly where their owners had parked them. Former residents, now elderly, walked streets they had not seen since childhood and found their own front steps coated in half a century of lake mud. Some found personal belongings preserved in the silt. In 2007, the water fell so far that the old racecourse appeared, along with rows of tree stumps sawn off by workers 70 years earlier, standing in the mud like grave markers. Souvenir hunters descended with metal detectors, pulling out coins and wedding rings, until furious former residents demanded the site be protected. But here is what unsettles the locals of the new Adaminaby. Rebuilt on higher ground, the lake keeps giving things back. Every drought, more of the drowned town surfaces, and fishermen on Yucumbene talk about snagging their lines on chimneys in calm water. They know exactly what lies beneath their boats. A town that was never given a funeral. Number 3. Joadja, New South Wales. Hidden in a valley in the Southern Highlands, 90 minutes from Sydney, lies a ghost town most Sydneysiders have never heard of. In the 1870s, hundreds of Scottish miners came here to extract shale oil, and they built a complete world at the bottom of a gorge. A school, a church, a hall, rows of cottages, and enormous sandstone refineries that look like ancient temples now that the bush has swallowed them. When kerosene from America made the shale industry worthless, the entire community walked out of the valley and never came back. At its peak, more than 1,000 people lived down here, and the only way in or out was a steep inclined tramway that hauled workers and shale up the cliff face. When the company folded, the machinery was abandoned where it stood, and a whiskey distillery has now returned to the valley, its owners insisting the ghosts do not mind the company. The valley kept everything. Because Joadja sits on private land behind locked gates, it was never looted or vandalized like other ghost towns. The ruins simply decayed in silence for over a century. Visitors on the rare guided tours describe an atmosphere that presses on the chest, and the town has developed a reputation as one of the most haunted places in New South Wales. People report children laughing near the old school ruins and figures moving between the retort ovens at dusk. The Scottish miners left a cemetery on the hillside, and the headstones tell a brutal story, row after row of children who never made it past their 5th birthday. Number 4. Mary Kathleen, Queensland. Between Mount Isa and Cloncurry sits a town that officially no longer exists, and the reason is buried in its rocks. Mary Kathleen was built in the 1950s as a model town for one purpose: mining uranium. It had everything: a cinema, an Olympic pool, manicured gardens, the most modern houses in outback Queensland. Workers raised families there while extracting one of the most dangerous substances on the planet. When the uranium contracts ended in 1982, the government did something unusual. Instead of letting the town fade, they erased it. Every single building was sold at auction and physically carried away. Today, only the street grid remains, a perfect suburban layout of curbs, driveways, and concrete slabs with nothing on them. Driving through it feels like touring a neighborhood that was deleted. Explorers who walk the slabs can still read the town like a floor plan. Here the tiles of a bathroom, there the concrete apron of the service station, and out on the edge, the cracked foundation of the open-air cinema where miners watched films under the stars. A few street signs survive, pointing at empty air, but the true reason locals stay away lies 3 kilometers up the road. The open-cut mine pit has filled with water of an impossible electric blue, and that color is a warning. The water carries elevated radiation levels, yet tourists still swim in it for photographs. The Kalkadoon people considered this country dangerous long before the miners arrived. Their warnings were ignored. The rocks, it turns out, were never safe to disturb. Number 5. Farina, South Australia. On the edge of the Steiglitz Desert stands a town built on a government lie. In the 1870s, officials promised settlers that rain follows the plough, that farming the desert would change the climate itself. They named the town Farina, Latin for flower, expecting wheat fields to the horizon. The rain never came. What came instead were droughts, dust storms, and summers that cracked the earth open. The wheat never grew, the farmers left, and the desert reclaimed its territory, one building at a time. Today, Farina is a field of roofless stone ruins on a plain so flat and silent you can hear your own heartbeat. The general store, the 2 hotels, the bank, all standing as hollow shells filled with sand. But the detail that disturbs visitors most is the cemetery, where the graves are divided by faith and the children's section is the largest. Some headstones record entire families lost within a single summer. Typhoid swept through in the 1880s, carried by the very water the settlers had prayed for, pooling foul and stagnant in the town dams. The railway kept Farina breathing for a few more decades, but when the line was finally rerouted, the last families loaded their lives onto trucks and drove away without looking back. Travellers on the Adaminaby track report that the ruins play tricks after dark, that lamplight appears in windows of buildings that have no roofs, and that the underground bakery, restored by volunteers, sometimes smells of bread on mornings when nobody has lit the oven. Number 6. Kuridala, Queensland. South of Cloncurry, in country so remote that your phone becomes a paperweight, stand the ruins of a copper empire. A century ago, Kuridala had 2,000 people, pubs, churches, a hospital, and one of the largest smelters in Australia. The smelter chimneys still tower over the scrub today, black against the sky, visible for kilometres across the plain. When copper prices collapsed after the First World War, the town bled out in a few short years. What makes Kuridala genuinely dangerous is what the miners left behind. The ground is riddled with unmarked shafts, some dropping 30 metres straight down. Hidden by spinifex grass and a thin crust of soil, cattle station workers have lost animals into holes that were invisible the day before. In 1913, cyclonic storms tore the roof from the hospital while patients lay inside, and in winter, the men slept on the warm slag heaps to escape the cold, unaware of what the arsenic-laced ash beneath their blankets was doing to their bodies. The slag heaps still contain traces of arsenic used in processing, and the dam wall holds back decades of contaminated tailings. Then there is the cemetery, where dozens of graves belong to men killed in the smelter, crushed, burned, or poisoned. Locals from the surrounding stations respect the place, but they do not linger. In summer, the ruins reach 50 degrees. The metal ticks as it expands, and the whole town sounds like it is still working. 6 places down, and the 6 ahead are the ones locals genuinely will not talk about. If this journey through forgotten Australia is gripping you, hit that like button right now. It tells us to keep digging up these stories. Now, back into the bush. Number 7. Gwalia, Western Australia. 230 kilometres north of Kalgoorlie sits the ghost town that emptied in a single afternoon. Gwalia grew around the Sons of Gwalia gold mine, once managed by a young American engineer named Herbert Hoover, who would later become President of the United States. For 60 years, the town thrived, home to over 1,000 miners and their families. Then, in December 1963, the mine announced its closure without warning. The company train was leaving, and there would not be another. Within 3 weeks, the population fell from 1,200 to 40. People grabbed what they could carry and abandoned the rest. That is why Gwalia today is the most intact ghost town in Australia. Walk into the miners' cottages, and you will find beds still made, calendars frozen on December 1963, kitchen tables set with crockery, children's toys on the floors. It is not a reconstruction. Nothing was staged. The dry desert air simply preserved the moment of departure like a photograph. Hoover's own house still stands on the hill above the pit, grand and verandahed, staring down at the cottages of the men whose labour built it. The mine itself reopened decades later and now plunges more than 1.6 kilometres underground, one of the deepest gold mines in the country, a living pit beside a dead town. Visitors describe the overwhelming feeling of having walked into someone's life seconds after they fled it. The question that follows you from house to house is simple. What does a town feel like in the moment it realises it is already dead? Number 8. Arltunga, Northern Territory. 110 kilometres east of Alice Springs, hidden in the ranges, lies the first town Central Australia ever had, and the cruelest. Gold was found here in 1887, and desperate men walked 600 kilometres from the Oodnadatta railhead, pushing wheelbarrows through the desert to reach it. Many died on the track before they ever saw the diggings. Those who arrived found a hell of heat, scurvy, and dry wells. The gold was locked in hard quartz, the water was scarce and bitter, and the nearest doctor was weeks away. The government built a battery and cyanide works to encourage the field, one of the most expensive follies in territory history, because by the time it was finished, the easy gold was already gone. Families lived in tents and stone huts through summers that killed their children, and supplies arrived by camel train when they arrived at all, yet they stayed. Because they had spent everything getting there, and going home meant admitting it was for nothing. The stone ruins that remain, the jail, the police station, the crushing battery, were built with obsessive care by men who had nothing but time and rock. The government battery still stands, its machinery seized mid-rotation. Rangers who maintain the reserve describe an oppressive stillness in the gorge, particularly around the old cemetery where unmarked graves outnumber marked ones. The Eastern Arrante people knew this country demanded respect. The miners learned it the hard way, and some of them never left, still lying in ground too hard to have ever given them anything. Number 9. Steiglitz, Victoria. Barely an hour from Melbourne, in the Brisbane Ranges, hides a gold town that once rivaled the city itself. In the 1860s, Steiglitz had 1,500 residents, 4 hotels, 3 churches, its own newspaper, and streets lit with promise. The quartz reefs below the town produced fortunes, and speculators claimed it would become the Ballarat of the South. Then the reefs pinched out. The deeper the miners dug, the less they found, and the town died in slow motion over decades, which is somehow worse than dying overnight. Businesses closed one by one, houses were dismantled and carted away for their timber. By the 1940s, only a handful of residents remained among the empty streets. Today the courthouse still stands, restored and alone, surrounded by paddocks where a town used to be. The bush has taken the rest, but it has not hidden it. Mine shafts pockmark the entire area, some capped, many not, and warning signs line the walking tracks. More than 650 shafts have been recorded around the town site, and rangers warn visitors never to leave the paths because the ground can open under a footstep that landed safely 1,000 times before. In wet winters, some shafts exhale mist at dawn, cold air rising from flooded workings far below. Locals from Adaminaby and Bacchus Marsh tell stories about lights in the forest at night, attributed to old miners still searching for the reef that betrayed them. The town cemetery sits in the trees, its iron fences guarding graves that outnumber the living population 50 to 1. Number 10. Cossack, Western Australia. On the Pilbara coast, where the tide swings 7 metres and cyclones arrive like clockwork, stand the bluestone bones of Western Australia's first pearling port. In the 1870s, Cossack was wild and wealthy, a harbour crowded with pearl luggers crewed by Aboriginal, Malay, Japanese, and Chinese divers who were sent to the seabed in brass helmets and canvas suits. The work was lethal. Divers died from the bends, from sharks, from cyclones that sank entire fleets in a night. The cyclone of 1881 drove luggers so far inland that wrecks were found in the scrub kilometres from the water, and for a time, the town also served as a leprosarium, where Aboriginal patients were confined far from their country, a chapter the tourist plaques mention only briefly. The town's segregated cemetery tells the story, with a Japanese section holding dozens of young men who died on the ocean floor. When the pearl beds were stripped bare, the industry moved north to Broome, and Cossack was left to the mangroves and the heat. The stone buildings were too solid to fall, so they simply stand there. The courthouse, the customs house, the jail, gleaming white against red dirt and turquoise water. It looks beautiful in photographs. It feels different in person. The old jail held Aboriginal prisoners in chains, many arrested for resisting the pearlers who had taken their people as forced labour. Locals say the town holds that history in its walls, and at king tide, when the water rises through the mangroves, Cossack feels less abandoned than besieged. Number 11. Linda, Tasmania. On the wild west coast of Tasmania, in a valley the locals call the gateway to the end of the world, stands one of the most photographed ruins in the state, and one of the least visited after dark. Linda served the North Mount Lyell copper mine, and its centrepiece was the Royal Hotel, a grand concrete building utterly out of place in the rainforest. In 1912, the mine down the road became the site of Australia's worst mining disaster, a fire that filled the tunnels with poison gas and killed 42 men. The rescue gripped the nation for a week, and some of the trapped miners survived underground for days, breathing through compressed air lines before they were finally brought up alive, blinking at a sky they had not expected to see again. Rescuers brought bodies up for days, while families waited at the pit head. The town never recovered its spirit, and when the railway closed, Linda emptied out. The rainforest here does not creep back slowly like the mainland bush. It devours. Moss and myrtle swallowed the cottages within decades, leaving the hollow shell of the Royal Hotel standing alone beside the road, its windows blind, its walls streaked black with rain. The West Coast has a saying that the country between Linda and Gormanston is haunted ground, and drivers on the Lyell Highway at night report a figure standing outside the hotel who is gone by the time their headlights swing back. Locals in Queenstown just nod when asked about it. 42 men, they say. Somebody has to keep the bar open. Number 12. Betoota, Queensland. At the end of this list stands the loneliest entry of all, a town in the Channel Country with an official population of 0. Betoota sits on the Gibber Plains between Birdsville and Windora, a single stone hotel surrounded by a horizon so empty it bends the mind. For decades, its only resident was Simon Remienko, a Polish immigrant who ran the Betoota Hotel completely alone, serving road trains and drovers in a town where he was the entire population. He reportedly kept the beer cold and the conversation short, and when travellers asked why he stayed, he would shrug and say that somebody had to. The nearest neighbour was more than an hour away, the nearest real town over 160 kilometres, and the mail came when it came. He closed the pub in 1997 and died in 2004, and for years, Betoota was that rarest of things, a town with nobody in it at all. The hotel stood locked with its bottles still on the shelves, baking under a sun that pushes 50 degrees, while dingoes crossed the main street that was never really a street. Travellers on the Birdsville track would stop, photograph the sign, and feel the specific unease of standing in a place that exists on maps, but not in any human sense. The hotel has since been reopened by new owners, and the town's name now powers a famous satirical newspaper. But drive out at dusk, watch the gibberstones glow red, and you will understand why the old drovers never camp there. Some places tolerate people. Betoota merely waits them out. 12 places, 12 reasons the Australian bush keeps its secrets. Some of these towns were killed by poison, some by water, some by the simple brutality of distance. But every one of them proves the same thing. In Australia, civilization is a thin crust, and the land underneath has all the time in the world. These 12 are only the beginning. The bush hides hundreds more. Forgotten stations, flooded mines, and settlements that appear on no official register, each one waiting patiently for a drought, a bushfire, or a curious traveller to bring it briefly back into the light. So here is the question. Would you spend a single night alone in any of these places? Tell us which one, and which one you would never set foot in, down in the comments. If this journey gave you chills, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because next week, we go somewhere even the maps have given up on. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, and stay on the marked roads.